At 9:47 this morning, inside the House of Commons, Prime Minister Keir Starmer rose to his feet and delivered a statement that may mark a turning point in Western history. It was not loud, it was not theatrical, but it was decisive. By the time he finished speaking, the foundations of the transatlantic alliance had shifted. The United Kingdom is formally endorsing Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's proposal to establish a $95 billion alternative security partnership fund. Britain will contribute $18 billion, the largest single national commitment. But money was not the true headline. The real shift came when Starmer confirmed that Britain and Canada will establish a bilateral defense coordination framework operating independently of existing United States-led structures. For more than a century, the United Kingdom and the United States have stood together in every major conflict, from the First World War to the beaches of Normandy, from the Berlin airlift to the long decades of Cold War deterrence. From Iraq to Afghanistan. The so-called special relationship has not merely been diplomatic language, it has been strategic reality. And this morning, that reality was called into question. In Washington, officials are already describing this moment as the most serious rupture in Allied relations since the Suez Crisis, when Britain and America found themselves on opposing sides of a geopolitical confrontation. Let us examine what Starmer said and what it means. He began with history. For 77 years, he said, NATO has underpinned our collective security. For over a century, partnership with the United States has reinforced that foundation. He paused. But alliances endure only when built on shared values, mutual respect, and reliable commitments. Reliable. That word did not go unnoticed. Starmer then addressed Canada directly. He stated that a NATO member had questioned Canadian sovereignty, threatened bilateral defense agreements, and destabilized alliance cohesion. Canada, he noted, had invoked consultation under NATO's framework. And Britain, he declared, believes Canada deserves support. The chamber fell quiet. Because what followed was not symbolic support, it was structural change. The Alternative Security Partnership Fund will operate under qualified majority voting, meaning no single member can veto legitimate security assistance to another. In practical terms, it limits the ability of one powerful state to block collective action, and that represents a significant departure from traditional alliance mechanics. But Starmer went further. He announced a UK-Canada bilateral defense coordination framework that includes joint military exercises, coordinated procurement, and independent intelligence sharing protocols. And here we must pause. Those intelligence protocols will operate outside existing Five Eyes structures. Five Eyes, the intelligence alliance between the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, has functioned since the Second World War on absolute trust. It is arguably the most sophisticated intelligence sharing arrangement in the world. To create parallel channels is not a minor administrative adjustment, it is contingency planning. It signals preparation for a scenario in which trust cannot be assumed. Then came the sentence that resonated across the Atlantic. The United Kingdom will defend its allies and its principles regardless of the reliability of any other partner. Reliability. In diplomacy, words are chosen carefully. That one was surgical. Within minutes, Washington reacted. At the United States Department of State, emergency meetings were convened. Senior officials reportedly described the announcement as a strategic shock. At the White House, advisors briefed President Donald Trump on the implications. With Britain's $18 billion, combined with France's commitment and Germany's anticipated contribution, the fund becomes viable even without American participation. That is the key. For decades, European security architecture depended fundamentally on American leadership and approval. This mechanism reduces that dependency. Public statements from Washington were measured but unmistakably strained. The White House called the decision disappointing. The Pentagon adopted a more cautious tone, reaffirming military cooperation and dialogue. That contrast is telling. Military institutions often prioritize stability and continuity. Political leadership can move more abruptly. Congressional reaction was divided. Critics of the administration framed Britain's move as a direct consequence of eroding Allied trust. Supporters of the president criticized London's decision as disloyal. But beyond immediate political reactions lies a deeper question. Why did Britain act now? There are several factors. First, the Commonwealth dimension. Canada and Britain share historic constitutional ties through the Commonwealth of Nations. Across Australia, New Zealand, and Caribbean states, diplomatic signals reportedly emphasized solidarity with Canada. Had Britain sided against Canada, it would have reverberated far beyond North America. Second, European coordination. Conversations between London, Paris, and Berlin indicate growing concern that European security cannot remain fully dependent on the stability of American domestic politics. Europe remembers the fragility of the 20th century. Many watching today lived through it. They remember when alliances failed, when miscalculations cascaded, when assumptions proved dangerous. This new fund is, in many ways, insurance. Insurance against unpredictability, insurance against paralysis, insurance against the possibility that one nation's political turbulence might destabilize an entire alliance. Now we must consider where this leads. There are three plausible paths forward. The first is reconciliation. Under this scenario, Washington recalibrates. Rhetoric softens, commitments are reaffirmed to NORAD, to intelligence sharing, to the inviolability of sovereignty among allies. The new fund proceeds, but as supplementary reinforcement, not structural replacement. Trust is bruised, but not broken. The second scenario is gradual realignment. Britain deepens coordination with Canada, France, and Germany. European defense spending increasingly flows through the new mechanism. NATO evolves into dual pillars, one American-led, one European-led. The special relationship does not collapse dramatically, it fades slowly through strategic drift. The third scenario is fracture. If tensions escalate, the United States could reduce participation in NATO's integrated structures. Europe, in response, could formalize a new defense union built around the Alternative Security Partnership Fund. The Western Alliance, which preserved peace in Europe for nearly 80 decades, would split into parallel power centers. History shows us that alliances rarely implode overnight. They erode through accumulated mistrust. For viewers who remember the Berlin blockade, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the long nuclear standoff between East and West, you understand that stability depends not only on weapons and budgets, but on confidence. Confidence that commitments will be honored. Confidence that words mean what they say. Confidence that when a crisis emerges, allies will stand firm. Britain chose Canada over America. For most of the past century, that sentence would have been unimaginable. Yet, here we are. It did not happen because Britain suddenly turned against the United States. It happened because British leadership concluded that its obligations to NATO, to the Commonwealth, and to its own strategic autonomy required preparation for uncertainty. The special relationship was never merely sentimental. It was built on trust, predictability, and shared democratic values. When any of those pillars weaken, the structure shifts. The coming days will matter enormously. Will Washington recalibrate? Will European contributions solidify this new framework? Will quiet diplomacy restore equilibrium? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a new strategic era, one in which Europe assumes greater defense independence and America's role becomes less central than it has been since 1945? History does not always announce its turning points in dramatic fashion. Sometimes they arrive in calm parliamentary chambers, in measured tones, at 9:47 in the morning. What happened today may be remembered as one of those moments. Not the end of an alliance, but the end of an assumption. And for a generation that has lived through war, reconstruction, and decades of fragile peace, that distinction matters profoundly.